Hi there. I'm Louisa Higgins, Arts Administrator for Riverside County Office of Education. And I'm presenting to you today, Give Me STEAM. What's up? And so that's my playful little title. But really what we're going to talk about today is how the arts can really help students connect to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, among other things. So a little bit about my background, because you might be thinking, well, gee, she's in charge of the arts and she's an artist, so what does she know about this other? And so I'd like you to know that I come from a family of doctors. So I really grew up around science my whole life. I had an uncle who was the dean of a medical school. I myself was a pre-med student until my senior year of college, and then I went on to pursue other degrees. I also coordinated the science fair for my children's school for 8 years, and I have a daughter who's a scientist and works for UC Davis. So I bring all that with me along with my background in the arts. And so before we get started, I really want to set what's our why? Why should we care about this? Why should we be interested in STEAM for our students? Well, first of all, I want you as teachers to work smarter, not harder, through integration, because we're always pressed for time. How do we fit everything in? And using arts integration is one way that we can include the arts and also bring all of that content in and get it all done and make it come alive and have fun with it. I also want us to be mindful of educating the whole child. And so we're going to activate left and right brain and bring everything to bear on student learning. And then finally, arts integration really creates a truly equitable education. So instead of saying, that students might get the arts as an enrichment piece if their parents send them to after school classes or camps or so on, we as teachers are making sure that every child has access to the arts and a full and complete education through the integration that we're bringing into the classroom. So I came up with this term STEAMers, so famous people who have been involved in STEAM over the years. And so history is full of examples of people who were good at both types of things that were science, technology, engineering, and math-based, and then also the arts. And they're what we call universal geniuses. And so if we know that, and we know that these examples exist, why would we try and silo the subjects? That is, keep them isolated and teach them one at a time and not interacting with each other. So let me show you a few of these folks. So the first one is Jacques Cousteau, and I just am a huge fan of his because I am also a diver. And he, besides the fact that he was a scientist, an explorer, and a researcher, he was also someone who took photographs and wrote books and made films. So his passions drove both sides of those types of activities, right brain and left brain. And so he's my first example. Then, of course, Leonardo da Vinci, one of the most famous artists of all time, but he also was so interested in the way things work. And so there's a picture of one of his journals where he's diagramming and he's creating mechanisms. And he was super interested in science and medicine. But then he's also one of the greatest painters of all time. And of course, the Mona Lisa. There's no mistaking that particular piece. So Leonardo da Vinci was both a scientist and an artist. Archimedes, lesser known, but of course, if you have a math background, you know him. So besides being a mathematician, physicist, engineer, inventor, and astronomer, he gave us some things like the golden triangle and the rule of thirds that really dominate the work we do in photography. And you might even look at this image here and recognize it if you have a nice camera, because the cameras come set up that way to help you compose artwork in the best possible way. Ansel Adams, another brilliant photographer, one of my personal favorites. And, besides the fact that he was raised with the arts and he loved photography, he really went back and studied, how can I understand the math behind making a great photo? How can I understand what happens in a dark room and the chemicals and so forth to produce the greatest possible art? So he was working with multiple things at the same time. Of course, Albert Einstein, so famous for being a violinist as well as a physicist. And he always said, if I hadn't gone into the science as a profession, I would have become a professional musician. Madame Curie, not only is she the first woman to win the Nobel Prize, she's the only woman to win it twice, and she also had a daughter who followed in her footsteps. So she came from a mother who was a music teacher and a father who was a math physics teacher. So she came into the world with both of those influences and went on to be an incredible scientist. I love the work of M.C. Escher, And he's someone I learned about growing up. And all of his artwork is based on mathematical principles, infinity, symmetry, perspective, geometry, and of course, tessellation. So not only are they beautiful and so intriguing to look at, but he's using math concepts to create them. And we even have politicians and statesmen who were also painters. So they had this, really intense, incredible work that they were doing, and they were also painting as I would say an offset to that and a complement to that. And so this picture in the left that you see was done by Winston Churchill and recently sold. Angelina Jolie owned it and recently sold it for millions and millions of dollars. This is Dr. Neri Oxman. She's at the MIT Media Lab, and she's multi-talented in science and in design. And the interesting thing about this place that was founded in 1985 is they have brought in all sorts of disciplines together to work under one roof. So you have engineers, artists, scientists, and they're working on technological advances that help people, but they don't just have artists and designers. They don't just have scientists and mathematicians. They have all of those folks teamed together to get the optimal work done. I would even go so far as to say that Nobel Prize winners are artsy. So if you look at the data on members of the National Academy of Sciences and the Royal Society, as well as Nobel Prize winning scientists, in the case of the Nobel Prize winners, they're almost 3 times more likely than the average scientist to have an artistic hobby or a crafty hobby. So you see, it starts to become clear how these go together, because neither the arts or sciences have a monopoly on teaching creativity, collaboration, or problem solving, which are things we really want for our students in the classroom. And so students can learn those common skills that can be applied between the STEM areas and the arts content areas. So analyzing, assessing, categorizing, classifying, predicting, justifying, interpreting, they're all reinforced by both STEM and the arts. So what does integration mean? So an integrated curriculum is one that connects different areas of study by cutting across those subject matter lines and emphasizing the unifying concept. So rather than have them separate and taught separately and silo them, we bring them together and they reinforce and strengthen the learning. So I want to take a look at some examples. So I'm going to show you several videos. I believe we have a half dozen examples of STEAM in action to really make that real. So the first one is not a video, it's a podcast recording. And this combines tech and engineering, which is what we need to do in order to make podcasts, and then language arts. So in this case, this is from a friend of mine at Soundtrap, which is owned by Spotify. They have this podcasting software, Leandro, Otero. And so he had students write an I am from poem, and then they made a podcast recording of that poem, adding sound effects and so forth to make it come alive. So let's take a listen.
Where I'm From poem. I'm from Joni Mitchell on the record player on a Sunday morning, from soup bubbling on the stove. I'm from black coffee, silver dollar pancakes, and too many donuts. I'm from long car rides to school and conversations with Dad as we drive. I'm from Nana whistling in the kitchen, Mom singing me to sleep, and sisters giggling after lights out. I'm from hot summer days, playing outside with neighborhood kids, and cold winter nights by the crackling fire reading alone. I'm from rosaries and prayer cards, incense and church choirs. I'm from the shores of Sicily and the farmsteads of Canada. I'm from the hustle and bustle of the city and a one-stoplight town upstate. I'm from a matriarchy, from a long line of women, daughters and mothers, readers and writers, singers and dancers, hostesses and wallflowers, trailblazers, all of them, myself included.
So after I show you each example, I'm going to ask you, what did you notice? And I want you to think about these questions silently to yourself. So first of all, how did the podcast enhance the delivery of that poem? How did it make it come alive? How did it help you visualize? And did you visualize based on the sounds and the words that you were hearing? And how could this be a social and emotional learning experience for students to both write and then create a podcast around their creation? So my next example combines science and art, and this happens to come from a group of videos called Easy Arts for Everyone. And I believe there's a total of 30 videos up on our RCOE-VAPA website, but there is a group that are just STEAM videos. And so let's take a look at this one about observational drawing. Hi, I'm Louisa Higgins, and thank you for joining us for Easy Arts for Everyone. Today we're going to be doing an observational drawing, which fits very nicely with our STEAM curriculum because we're integrating science and the arts together to have greater impact. So the three things that we want to be doing today include, first, noticing deeply. So whatever it is that we're concentrating on drawing, we're really going to take a good hard look at it, really concentrate on it. Secondly, we want to capture the basic shape of whatever the object is. That comes first. And then we move on to adding the details. And so scientists and artists are very similar in that they observe the world around them and then they record it, and often for different reasons, but that is a similar concept. And when you start to draw something and you're really concentrating very hard on it, you start to activate your right brain, which is more analytical, as opposed to the left brain, which is just really about emotion and creating. We want to concentrate on making a drawing that's realistic, not necessarily artistic. And finally, we want to eliminate our preconceptions about what something looks like or should look like based on our memories or just kind of what we imagine. So for instance, if I say to you, please draw an eye, and I say, oh, okay, I know what an eye looks like. And then I give you something that looks like this. So a big old eyeball and the pupil right there. Or perhaps I'm thinking of something that I've seen like in a cartoon and it's more cutesy and it's a different shape. It's an imagined shape, okay? So compare that to an actual eye. So if you were to look in the mirror or look at a model and you're looking at the eye, notice how much detail is there that was not included in my cartoon rendering. So you have an eyelid and there's eyelashes. The pupil is placed in the eye in the center in most cases, unless it's moving around looking. There's color. There's just a tremendous amount going on here. So my cartoon eye did not capture it realistically, and it didn't include all of the observations I could make. So just to demonstrate this for you, here is a black and white photograph of an actual eye, human eye, and I'm going to pay close attention after noticing deeply, and I'm going to draw the basic shape, which I see is more like an almond shape, or you could even say like a football shape, but it's looking like that. And then when I look at the pupil, it is not all the way down, but it's kind of roundish, and then it's darker here in the middle. And of course, from a scientific perspective, after I have done this drawing, I can do all the labeling and know all the parts of the eye that I'm representing. And there's the eyelid. And I see it has lashes, which I could very slowly and painstakingly over time add. And there's some folds of skin down here. So this looks a lot different than, say, the cartoon eye. So you get the idea with that. And I would spend much more time on that, but you could about halfway through it. So what did you notice? So first of all, I talked about how our artists and scientists alike in the way that they observe, notice deeply, make observations, and note them. And what learning modality am I using here in this video? Auditory, visual, kinesthetic, tactile. And then maybe think about how you could use this particular skill in your own classroom. So moving on to our next example, this one combines science and media arts, and there's a lot going on here. And this is a video from a program called Dance Your PhD. It's an actual program that exists worldwide, and it's where scientists and mathematicians come together and they create videos around their concepts. They're using the video to choreograph their concept and make it come alive in a different way. So let's watch what this team put together.
What's up? University of Helsinki 2020. Gotcha, macha, gotcha. Vitus, Jacob, Evil in the house.
Put your mask on. Wash your hands.
Vitus, let him have it.
Let me tell you something about secondary aerosols. They form right in the atmosphere from gaseous precursors. First, single molecules come and cluster together. That is a phoric acid with some base, which whatever.
Ammonia or DMA, highly oxygenated compounds, all of them suitable to form with the acid strong bonds. Once the cluster has reached a certain size, water starts to condense. It's a cloud droplet surprise. Now we want to understand the start of this process. We will use chemistry, physics and computers in excess.
We are looking for molecular clusters. We're trying to find them faster. Searching through configuration of space. With the powers of computers, we'll understand sooner the birth of cloud condensation nuclei. Let me do some coding. I produce a program. Shooting as equations will solve all my problems. I never have to leave my chair even for a second. When science done virtually no dead ends.
Fine, I'll do it myself. Woo! For arranging molecules, there are very many ways they rotate or translate them.
That video never gets old. And we actually duplicated that program in Palm Springs Unified School District, where we had really successful choreography to math and science concepts done by elementary, middle, and high school, and gave awards and so on. And I can tell you on a personal level, it's really, really engaging and fun. And so what did you notice about this particular example? So how could creating a video about a science concept enhance the student learning? How much would they have to know and really understand that concept before they created a video around it? What kind of skills would you need to make a video like that? To write it, to find the music, what are the dance moves? Is there costuming, makeup, acting, the science? And then, how could you use a video done by your students to allow them to show you in a very UDL way, Universal Design for Learning, their particular learning? So our next example is involving math and dance. And so this is young children. This is a first grade classroom. And let's watch what their teacher does with them.
Okay. I'm Mrs. Husband, and this is my first grade class, and we are going to use two elements of dance. We're using a level 10. Can we show everybody what a level 10 looks like? And a level 1. Can we go down to a level 1? We are going to be comparing numbers to use greater than and less than today. If you have a number that is greater than your partner's today, you are going to hold it up to a level 10, which is one of the elements in dance. If you have a number that is less than your partner, you're going to go down to a level 1. That means less than, okay? Okay, good job. Now you may whisper with your partner to see what level you're going to stand at.
22.
22 is?
22 greater than 12. And 12 is less than 22.
Excellent. We're going to...
So with that particular example, what did you notice? How does the dancing reinforce the math concept of greater than and less than? How does moving around and listening to music affect the learning? Is it social and emotional? And how could you use music and dance to teach math in your classroom? This next example is just right here on the screen, and this is combining science as well as visual and literary arts. So the concept is the chemistry of paper, and then the student has done a prose writing about it, a poetic writing, and then gone ahead and done an illustration all around the poem. So what did you notice about this? Do you see that we're using 3 subject matters in this lesson? How does writing a poem differ from just plain text? And does adding the visual element to the assignment expand student understanding and engage the student in a different way? Our next example is math and music. Let's take a listen.
I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's all that fit inside the ones place value line. So I picked another pair and made a group of 10 that fit into a bag perfectly even. 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. I had to keep picking pairs of hunger I had to feed. So I picked another 10, and that led to one group of 100. A pair bumped me on the head, and I said, 10 ones make 10. 10 groups of 10 are 100. 10 hundreds make 1,000. The pattern never ends. I rode my bike 1 whole mile, then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and in a little while another mile made one group of 10. A little voice inside my head said, keep going, I know you can. 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. I never knew I had so many miles inside me. The end of my trip was coming up ahead. I rode 10 more miles and reached 100. Then that little voice inside my head said, 10 ones make 10. 10 groups of 10 are 100. 10 hundreds make 1,000. The pattern never ends.
That is a catchy song. And I know from personal experience, when I was young, I had such a tough time with the times tables. I think that was being taught when I was in 2nd or 3rd grade. And I really struggled because the only way it was taught over and over again was flashcards. And the light bulb did not go off for me. I needed another strategy. So maybe music would have done it for me, or maybe movement would have been doing it for me. So that's what I'm talking about how can we light up students and get them to learn in different ways by offering multiple avenues. So the questions here, what did you notice? How might music impact an auditory learner versus just reading or speaking or using flashcards? Could learning a song and repeating it assist in the learning process? Like you have a tool to work with and you could go back to that song and maybe sing it to yourself when you're trying to figure something out. And then how could you write and sing a song with your students to teach or reinforce a math, a science, an engineering, or a technology concept? I want you to start thinking about that. This is another great example, and this is from a teacher in Riverside County, and something she did with her students during the COVID lockdown to keep them engaged. And she's using tech and media arts to create this film, but she has English language arts and music and dance happening as well. So this is done by Ms. Tina Salas.
Teachers bring us all their best. They teach us well. We pass our test. We like to see our friends on screen, but we can't wait to get the green. Like that is to be back at school, to learn and grow, play by the rules. We can't wait to be back at school, to learn and role play by the rules. We can't wait to be back at school, to learn and grow, play by the rules. School's the best. It's set apart from other charters performing arts. Hip-hop, theater, band, and more. It's just so fun. We don't get bored. I love my school and it loves me. I love my school and it loves me. I love my school and it loves me. Julia Lee performing Arts Academy.
Isn't that great? So what did you notice? How does the technology and the art of filmmaking enhance learning for those students? And is the language arts separate or is it integrated along with the music and dancing? And did this learning exercise engage for students and use more than one learning modality? And on top of that, I don't have it listed here, but how is Ms. Salas really using social and emotional learning to keep her students engaged and connected to her and the school? I appreciate her sharing that with us. So in summary, this group of examples, the main takeaways that I want you to retain are that it's really about student engagement, that fun and that enjoyment of learning and using multiple modalities. So it could be auditory, it could be visual, it could be kinesthetic, it could be tactile. We're going to mix it up and we're going to have all of those at play in our teaching. And we're really allowing for social and emotional learning, which is incredibly important in coming back to school, that students feel a sense of community and a belonging. And studies prove that that creates resiliency, and we need that coming back from the traumatic year that we've all had. I'd also like to point out how STEAM relates to the current pedagogies in education of social and emotional learning, culturally relevant teaching, and universal design for learning, because they're all very much woven through what we do in STEAM. So when you talk about social and emotional learning, it's really about emotions and feelings and engaging those, and they wouldn't be there without the arts. It'd be harder to engage those capacities. So my shorthand for that is arts helps us feel. And here's a couple of examples of the dancers and Gustavo Dudamel of LA Phil there. They are feeling what they are doing as they're creating art and performing. Culturally relevant teaching is really made possible via the presence of the arts in the way other content areas can't do it as much. And certainly science, technology, engineering, and math, because we can really make thoughtful choices as teachers. And that art gives context and meaning. And so when students recognize their culture and see performers that look like them, we're really making, again, that sense of belonging and that relevance to what's happening in the classroom. It really helps students to engage with us. And then UDL, Universal Design for Learning, is really, in short, student choice and voice. And so we can give that to students through the arts in letting them demonstrate to us our learning in unique and innovative ways that involve art making. So arts lets me show my learning to you in a variety of ways. And so we have a tableau happening on the left, which is like a frozen scene. And then we have podcasting on the right. Brain research also supports STEAM. So when you talk about Gardner, Bloom, Maslow, and what we know about left and right brain, they all support this notion of STEAM and integrating subjects. So if you look at this wheel, this is Gardner's multiple intelligences, which we all learn about in our formative classes for teaching, but everything on the wheel is represented when you have STEAM, and lots of those wouldn't be there if we didn't have the arts component. When you talk about Bloom's taxonomy, this is how he ranked the order of thinking skills, and you see that creating is right up there at the top. And so when we're creating and art making, we're right at the top of Bloom's taxonomy, which is where we want to be. And there's another pyramid that we want to be at the top of, and that's Maslow's hierarchy of student needs. And so that piece, that love and belonging and esteem that comes through social and emotional learning and art making is the path to self-actualization, which is what we certainly want for all of our students. Left and right brain. Left brain people are said to be more logical, analytical, rational. Right brain people are said to be more creative, free thinking, intuitive. And I think what I've been able to point out rather successfully in this time together is that there's no reason that we can't be both and activate both. We don't have just half a brain. We can use our whole brain and engage our students' whole brains. So to reiterate, no working in silos, working interdisciplinary and working with integration. And I'd like to point out that it is part of an equitable education. It is fair that all students get all of the subjects. When we take something away, we marginalize students and we give them an education that is not the best it can be. And so we want everything for our students. It's particularly important for second language learners. And here in California, we have, such a great, many of them. And so the arts are an on-ramp for learners because they're less intimidating and they offer many opportunities and give students a way to shine before they are fluently speaking the language, and so that they have success in the classroom and are encouraged. We don't want them to just be constantly doing remedial work and not have the fun and joy that they could conceivably have in their education. Back when I was training and teaching, we talked a lot about TPR, which is total physical response. And that's a teaching method that was developed by a psychologist, and it was coordinating language and physical movement. So when I talk to you about things like dancing or acting things out, we make that connection to language and learning through our bodies, our whole bodies. So whole brain and whole body. So if you're wondering, okay, how do I get started? This sounds good. What I recommend is kind of break it down and make it doable. So if you have a group of teachers, you assign one art form per teacher, because there's 5 art forms: art, music, theater, dance, and media arts. And then each teacher creates one lesson and shares it out with the team. And you can slowly build a repertoire that way. It's important to be open to risk and failure, because if you're new to this, it's going to feel awkward, and some lessons will work better than others. And it can often be messy, like making visual art can be very messy. So let's do the math on that. If I have a grade level team of 5 teachers, and each teacher takes one of these 5 areas: visual art, dance, theater, dance. Oh, I have dance there twice. Visual art, dance, theater, media arts. Oh, I tripped myself up on that, didn't I? And music, forgive me, music. If each teacher produces one lesson using their assigned art form, and they share it out with their team, that's 5 teachers, 1 lesson equals 5 lessons. If they repeat it each month, and there's 5 lessons a month, and you do that for 9 months, now you have 45 integrated lessons. So you've created STEAM integration in your school in 1 year. And I love it because you're writing it and there's no new curriculum for you to buy. So my idea is that you plant one STEAM tree at a time, just slowly at first, but next thing you know, you have the whole STEAM forest. So in conclusion, we've talked about famous, I call them STEAMers or universal geniuses. So that those examples are out there in history. And then we went through about a half dozen examples of STEAM lessons. And of course, there's tons of stuff on the internet. And if you type in RCOE and then a space VAPA, it will access our Easy Arts for Everyone videos. There's 30 of them on there. I believe 5 of them are STEAM dedicated. And we have a lesson plan bank. We talked about relating pedagogies to STEAM. So if you're doing STEAM, you can feel comfortable that you are really right in line with what is most current in our understanding of educational excellence. And I talked a little bit about how do you get started doing STEAM and how can you make that work in your team and in your school site. Because really what I'm after is for us to have the best year ever as we move forward. So I thank you for taking the time to watch this. You can email me at lhiggins@rcoe.us to give me feedback or with further questions. Thank you.